Welcome back. I'm Jen Potter, the host of The Wow Within. And today I'm telling you a little bit about my story, about where I've been and all of the things that led me to where I am today. And in the first segment, we talked a little bit about my childhood, about how there were certain things in my childhood that I had to overcome at a very early age. My mom was one of my abusers. I was sexually and physically abused by multiple family members when I was a child. And it's really hard to talk about that, right? We have people on the show and they talk about their stories and all the things that they overcame, and it's there's a lot of credit that needs to go into someone being able to come face to face with the things that they've gone through um, throughout their lives. And for me personally, I didn't always want to talk about those things. And I've been through some very traumatic things. And I talked a little bit about this before, but in my 30s, I was diagnosed with a heart condition. And from my 30s to now, so the past, 12, 13 years, I've pretty much talked about the trauma that I've gone through in the past 13 years, having a heart condition, having a heart attack. But I never quite talked about my childhood. And I didn't talk about my childhood because of that fear of, oh my God, what are they going to think? Right. And I said that before. What is someone going to think of me if they know that these things happened to me, that my mom was a drug addict and an alcoholic? And oh my God, what are they going to think of me if they knew that my grandfather was a pedophile? That has nothing to do with me. And, it took a long time for me to say, this is me, that is them. I can only be responsible for the person that I am. I can't be responsible for the people around me. And, I don't really give a lot of advice, but the, few rules of advice is don't listen to anybody else's advice. And the other rule of advice is you can only control what we can control. We can't control how other people are going to respond or how they're going to act, but we can control how we respond and we can control how we react. And it wasn't until I had to really hear that over and over and over again until I started realizing, wow, you know what? I'm not responsible for the things that happened to me as a child, but I am responsible for my healing. And, when I was younger, up until the age of like 10, 11, my mom lived with us. And as we got older, my dad was a single dad for a long time. And he took care of me and my brothers, which meant my dad worked full time. And I spent a lot of time being the mom. I had to grow up very fast. I think of my 12-year-old now, and I'm just like, wow, my daughter can barely make macaroni and cheese in the microwave. And I remember making full fledged meals for my siblings at that time. And my teenage years and my early 20s were very difficult. Um, the decade between 10 and 20, I lived with my dad and my siblings, my brothers, and life was tough. My dad worked a lot. My dad worked really hard to take care of us, and it was still really difficult. We lived off of, food stamps and the Salvation Army and, all of these subsidized programs to be able to take care of us and make sure that we had a roof over our head, make sure that we had heat in the house. There were times as a kid, I think about this and I retell this story quite often because it's comical. I cannot eat out of a microwave. I can heat up rice and popcorn, but I cannot physically eat anything reheated from a microwave. When we were children, we ran out of propane in the house that we lived in, but we still had to eat. And I remember my dad said, "Let's put a chicken in the microwave." And did you know you can cook a chicken in a microwave, but when you cook a chicken in the microwave, it turns gray. But that was the only way that we were eating. And the smell and the thought of that chicken to this day, still, I just think of it and I can smell it and I'm like, nope. But we did what we had to do to survive. We ate a lot of mac and cheese, a lot of ramen, and a lot of things in a microwave. And it was disgusting and traumatizing, but I'm still here today. So I guess that's a positive. But there were a lot of things that we had to go through in that time frame. And there were a lot of things that happened. Like I said, because my dad worked so much, I had to overcome a lot. I had to grow up very quickly. Thankfully, throughout high school, I was able to participate in programs that enriched my education. School came very easy to me, so I never really had to try. I have a photographic memory, so being able to just pass, it was easy. So I was able to kind of get by. I never really tried too hard. I played sports, but still, again, I never tried. I tried to just keep my head above water and kind of try to stay low key. I I loved people, but I always felt like I never really fit in, and I don't know if I felt like I didn't fit in because, I had to wear my dad's clothes to school because we really didn't have much, and, trying to make that look cool and trying to, fit in and not be made fun of was very difficult. But as I started getting a little bit older, I realized that one of the things that I have always been good at is being the center of attention. Somehow, very early on, I realized that I could be the center of attention for anything. I knew that when I walked in a room, everyone would pay attention to me. I knew when I told a story, everybody would listen to me. And so, as I started getting a little bit older in my late teens and my early 20s, I started using that to my advantage. I started using it to get jobs. I started using it to start to get in with the people that I knew, that if I impressed one more person, I could get on to the next thing, whether it was in school, whether it was at work, whatever that may be. Anything I wanted, I knew that I just had to talk to someone or smile, and I could get what I wanted. And so from late teens to early 20s, I started becoming a very heavy people pleaser. I knew that if I could get whatever I want and be like, "Look what I did. Look what I did for you." And, I got the highest score on this test. I got, the highest award in this program. And I was constantly seeking validation, but I knew that if I sought validation, that I'd be like, "Look what I did." I had this awful childhood, but I could say to someone, "I did this one thing, so therefore, how cool am I?" And I used that as a distraction. I said, if I did all of these things, it would distract everybody from all of the negative things that happened in my life and were continuing to happen. When I was in my 20s, I dated someone who was very verbally abusive. And I think in hindsight, I never quite saw it. I saw it as an opportunity for me to try to fix people. I was also, that type of person. If I couldn't fix myself, but I could fix other people. So those were the people that I surrounded myself with. And so that's not necessarily the case because we can't fix somebody who doesn't want to be fixed. But, I was young and naive and I thought that was it, right? Like, oh, if I'm with this person, I can fix them. No, we can't fix anybody. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Remember what I said? We control ourselves. We cannot control other people. And so I put myself in situations that were I thought I could control. And, not having control when I was younger, I would say, I'm going to do all of these things. In my not early 20s, late 20s, I actually ran the Boston Marathon. And I only ran the Boston Marathon to be like, because it's something I wanted to do. I was, I am and was an athlete, and I ran the Boston Marathon the first time just to say I ran the Boston Marathon. And it was more so of, hey, look what I can do. Look what, if I want to do something, I'm going to do it. And I've proven that time and time again. I've always wanted to teach my kids, if there's something you want to do, you can do it. And I'm not a fast runner by any means, but for me, it was my excuse to divert the attention, right? So if I said, "Look at all of this. I ran the Boston Marathon. I've worked all of these jobs. I have all of these degrees. I Look what I can do." And part of it was trying to get the attention from the people that I needed it the most. And and truth be told, it was trying to get my dad's attention. And I knew that I lost my mom's attention a long time ago. But it was in my 20s where I started doing all of these things to be like, "Dad, look what I did." Like, I ran the Boston Marathon, and they were there that day. They all missed me at the finish line the first time I ran the Boston Marathon because my time sucked and my chip stopped, and so they never got to see me actually cross the finish line, but my dad and my stepmom and my siblings and my husband were all there, and, boyfriend at the time, and, it was great that they were there, but it was also disappointing because I'm like, I crossed the fucking Boston Marathon uh, finish line, and nobody was there to cheer me on. So it was like I just did that, but no one was there to witness it. And but it was more so from that place of, look what I can do. Look what I did. I got my finally finished my degree in my late 20s, and I remember how important it was for me to have my dad there. And there was a reason why he had to leave after the graduation. And I just remember saying to myself, like, why do I seek that attention so much from somebody else, but I don't seek it for myself? And that was kind of a pivotal moment for me. I spent 30 years trying to get other people's attention to say, look at me, and not realizing that the only validation that I needed to seek was from myself. And so I spent the next decade starting to work on myself a little bit more and being in a different headspace and being in a different place and becoming a mom that, it took some serious time and serious work to kind of get to that point. And, you know, it took over a decade. It took over a decade to be the person that can now sit in front of you and say, I finally put the work in. So for the first 30 years of my life, I went through a lot of trauma, and then I started seeking validation, and even, regressing. Even in my 30s, I regressed a lot in my 30s as well, but it was getting up until that point. And so we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how the last decade kind of shifted my perspective and kind of getting to where I am today. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.